are fundamental underlying issues surrounding this whole crisis, which will not be solved simply by the arrest and detainment of Laurent Gbagbo. This may go some way to helping the situation. On the other hand, people are wondering here if this will inflame his militia that are still out on the streets. We've certainly seen them down on the border with Ghana, where we are. They control still a large swathe of the southeast of the country. So we're going to have to wait and see exactly what happens on the ground in terms of his soldiers who are out. When we went up to some of his sort of ununiformed militia on the border with Ghana and said, what do you think about the situation? They were sort of saying, well, what situation? There is no situation. Gbagbo's president and always will be president. So they were pretty defiant to us, and I would imagine news that he has now been arrested and is being detained at the Gulf Hotel will possibly inflame them even further. So I don't think this is over completely, but clearly this is a part of the puzzle that needed to be solved in order to diffuse this situation. This is the result of weeks of standoff, really, and a complete role reversal as well, because Alassane Ouattara, the internationally recognized president who won the election in November, himself was sort of holed up in the Gulf Hotel, surrounded by Gbagbo forces for months, and now in an ironic twist, a change of roles, it is Laurent Gbagbo who ended up in a bunker underneath the presidential palace, surrounded by forces loyal to Ouattara and of course the French and the UN as well. We're being told very firmly that it was the Republican forces of Côte d'Ivoire, those loyal to Ouattara, who arrested Gbagbo and not the French. And as you heard from the ambassador there, they're talking now about bringing him to justice. We'll have to see exactly how that plays out, where exactly they're thinking that will take place. And as I say, what happens to Gbagbo's forces on the ground? Will they simply melt away and dissipate, or will they stand and fight?
And another question, Dan, about the army. There had been members of the army loyal to Laurent Gbagbo, as there had been a militia. But what of Alassane Ouattara's military forces? Where did he get his support from?
Well, the country's been divided since the civil war in sort of 2002 and 3 between the sort of north and the south, with the zone of confidence, as it was called, dividing the country. So, in effect, Ouattara's side had effectively controlled a whole chunk of the north for some 8 years anyway, and those forces have basically pushed down and now taken most of Abidjan, but we still don't know quite how much of the city is secure. We're certainly being told here in neighbouring Ghana that it's still very dangerous there, and this is not a city that has completely been restored to normality. We're at an airport where a lot of helicopters and planes are coming in, bringing people out of Côte d'Ivoire. That a lot of foreigners coming out on helicopters and so on. So, clearly, this, just because he's been arrested does not yet mean that the city overall is secure, and it doesn't necessarily follow that his forces and his militia out on the streets, some of whom appear to be pretty lawless, are going to now sort of give up and put down their guns.
Obviously, what's been taking place of great concern to the people of Ivory Coast. Dan, what's the symbolic importance of this, though, to the region? What's taking place in Abidjan today?
Well, I think there's an argument to be said that, this was a sort of touchstone for African democracy in a way, and that there are a lot of people hoping that this, that democracy would be allowed to flourish here. I think it would be wrong to portray this simply as a contest between, some sort of, tyrant or dictator and a man, Alassane Ouattara, who is a bastion of democracy. I mean, there's been a lot of allegations against Ouattara's side in all this, notably with that massacre up in the northwest of the country in Douakwe, where several hundred people were killed. Now, we just don't know who was responsible for those deaths, whether it was, as was being claimed locally, Ouattara's men, or whether this was ethnic violence. But this all comes down to, what it is to be Ivorian in a way. And the reason that Ouattara has been excluded from trying to become president in the past is because, his enemies claim that his father is from Burkina Faso and that, he's not truly Ivorian. Those issues of identity around around, what it means to be Ivorian won't go away simply because Laurent Gbagbo has been arrested. So there are some pretty fundamental issues to resolve in Ivory Coast before there can be any sense of sort of stability and normality.